Here with reaction is Don Brown, a U.S. Navy veteran, JAG officer, and Senate candidate in the great state of North Carolina, and Colonel George Washington Markert, a Marine veteran and candidate for Senate in Colorado. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me.
Good to be here, Riley.
So Don, I want to start with you because here's what I see. It's more than just a show of force from the most powerful military on the planet. It is a huge win for American businesses, for the U.S. military, for the U.S. government, and for American companies. And I want to get your response to what we're seeing.
What we're seeing is a radical transformation back toward freedom in a Latin American nation, Venezuela, that essentially went communist in 1999 when Hugo Chavez brought in his version of Bolivarianism. They had previously nationalized, seized, and stolen American assets. We built the oil reservoirs down there. After that, Riley, there were arbitration awards of up to $150 billion in favor of American companies, which had not been repaid. That money still had not been repaid. In addition to that, we know that that Maduro and before him Chavez were involved in narco-terrorism. These narco-terrorist groups like Tren de Aragua and others have been sending drugs into the United States. As I pointed out many times on the campaign trail, we lost more Americans in 1 year to fentanyl than in 10 years to the Vietnam War. Just think about it, that's staggering. And so these drugs, whether it be fentanyl, cocaine, or whatever, have become massive weapons of mass destruction, I should say, that take American lives. Very proud of the president, proud of our naval forces, proud of Delta Force and the entire combined military effort to move in with such brilliance. And now we've turned China off the pipeline, and the United States is going to be the beneficiary of that oil. It's going to help oil prices and help the American economy in a big way. So kudos to the president and my friend, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and our members of the armed forces who carried out this mission.
Yeah, now I want to follow up on that, and then I will ask the Colonel about it as well. But just how significant is that for America's national security and for security in the Western Hemisphere? Because we just had Chinese officials right here in our backyard, and now presumably they will be sent home packing.
Sure. Well, petroleum security is national security. Energy security is national security. And this is the Monroe Doctrine, the Monroe Doctrine. But if you want to talk about America first means protecting our backyard. You don't let communists influence in our backyard. They have been tapping submarine cables on the bottom of the ocean to try to spy on our communications. The intelligence general who was serving both Chavez and Maduro gave a statement in early December outlining a lot of this and even went into some of the election fraud stuff. So we're dealing with a narco-terrorist. Even NATO and even Biden refused to recognize. Remember, Maduro is the legitimate president of Venezuela. He's a narco-terrorist who poses as president, and the president has done everything that he can properly within his authority as commander-in-chief, legally so, to make Americans safer and to increase our stature in the world and eventually to help us economically as well. So I'm very, very proud of him.
Thank you for that, Don. Now, Colonel, I do want to get your perspective on this because what we saw happen in Caracas seems huge. I mean, just thinking about it, Vladimir Putin has spent nearly 4 years trying to topple Kyiv, and he's completely failed. Meanwhile, the U.S. government was able to capture Nicolas Maduro and his wife in a matter of hours. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think first of all, it's a master stroke, right? And it's also something that I've suspected, throughout my military career as we started to look at what we call near-peer competitors. The Russians, I believe, have been exposed to be a paper tiger. You look at their military; they may have a large country, but their economy is about the same size as Spain or Italy. Their soldiers are not the most well-trained or paid, or they don't really have high morale skill sets that the U.S. military has. And I think when you look at the two cases and you see what we were able to do, not only with the buildup of naval expeditionary capabilities in the Caribbean and the Atlantic, the show of force that we put out there, military might, but also the elements of national power and the interagency cooperation that we saw with law enforcement, Coast Guard, and our U.S. military. To pull this off with zero casualties, I thought was absolutely outstanding. And that sends a strong message to the rest of the world that we will not put up with this type of activity that threatens our national security.
Yeah, so let's talk more about that. I mean, what do you think Xi Jinping is thinking right about now? Or how about the Ayatollah? Or how about Vladimir Putin?
Well, it makes them pause. Certainly, with China, there's the Taiwan issue. With Iran, long been a massive state sponsor of terrorism on a global stage. We've seen that. Those of us who have served for any length of time have come face to face with Iranians. And certainly the strikes on their nuclear capabilities some time ago sent a strong message, but they're always going to try to rebuild those capabilities. And our competitors out there are always going to be looking to test us. They're going to look to test our resolve. And we all know, if you look and examine history, weakness, even the perception of weakness, invites aggression. So you have to, as the term they've been using, peace through strength, you have to demonstrate that at all times, and then show that you have the will to use these capabilities, not only to enhance our national security posture, but also to increase our prosperity as a nation.
So I want to follow up on that, Colonel, with Don actually for a minute, because here there is some criticism of what we saw happen in Venezuela, and I do want to get your reaction to it, because here's my mindset. If you strike the United States of America, and I think sending drugs and poison to America is striking us, then we should strike back, and 10 times harder. And if you retaliate for that, then we should strike back again 100 times harder. Don, to me, that's just basic common sense, and that's really our duty as a country, is to protect our people. So I want to get your thoughts about why that is so controversial for some people in modern American politics.
It's controversial because the Democrats don't like the fact that we took out a narco-terrorist, first off. But look, presidents of the United States have been using military forces ever since Jefferson sent the Navy and the Marine Corps into the Mediterranean, the Barbary Pirates War, to protect naval American shipping. Franklin Roosevelt gave, shoot-on kill orders to the U.S. Navy almost a year before Pearl Harbor. Abraham Lincoln arrested the RMS Trent, which had Confederate sympathizers. Protecting Americans on the high seas is something that we have done. They never complained, of course, when Obama ordered drone strikes in Somalia and arguably some American citizens were killed. So they're talking out of both ends of their mouth. But this is certainly something that the president has done, and has done appropriately. He's not required by the United States Constitution to consult Congress. Sometimes maybe you want to, but in this case, consulting Congress could have resulted in the loss of American life in the operation. And he's certainly consulted them on the backside. We have not inserted troops into the area. The War Powers Act, to the extent that it may be constitutional, there are questions about that, does not apply here. This is nothing new. President Reagan went in and struck Libya after they killed some Americans in a nightclub there in Germany, in Frankfurt. We've seen this sort of thing over and over. President Trump went in and took out Soleimani, for killing Americans.
Yes,
these narco-terrorists, we have to understand, at the end of the day, are killing Americans, and they are using what was left of their oil production capability to finance these terror operations. So the Democrats can complain all they want. They expose themselves more. I read an article in Axios that some moderate Democrats are frustrated that the radical element, which is taking control of the party, is complaining about this and makes them look stupid. It exposes their stupidity and their lack of patriotism. But I couldn't be more proud of the president of our armed forces today.
Colonel Markert, what do you think about that perspective on it?
So I think he's spot on. It's interesting how there is this fringe element in the Democrat Party that no matter what the president does, they come out and they speak out against it, and they say he's wrong. And some of those people actually are elected officials right here in my state, in Colorado. I see them speak quite often about these types of things. And really, I think what everybody's looking for is a safe, secure, prosperous nation with an eye towards the future that will always assume the role of a world leader. And that not only will we protect our own borders and our citizens, but also the interests of this country, as well as the interests of our allies and partners around the globe. And that's a tall order. It's very difficult to do, but this administration seems to have a very good plan to do that. And one thing after another keeps unfolding here, and we see success after success. And like I said before, it sends a strong message to our adversaries, that this president does not play around.
Yes.
And he's definitely considering all aspects before he makes a move, but it makes them rethink their position geostrategically, economically, and militarily, and that's what we need in order to assume the role that we've rightly taken.
And by the way, Colonel, President Trump gave Nicolas Maduro every diplomatic opportunity possible to make nice, to play ball, right? He gave him a chance. He said, leave Venezuela and you'll get amnesty. You'll get protections. But Maduro spat in his face. He welcomed the U.S. intervention, and he reaped what he sowed. So as far as I'm concerned, Maduro made his own bed, and now he's actually being made to lie in it. But that brings us Don, back to you really quickly. Final question. Before we wrap up, let's talk about the case. I mean, Nicolas Maduro says he's a decent man, and he says he's not guilty, and he's facing a possibility of life in prison. So what do you see happening in his case moving forward?
Well, I'm always nervous whenever a liberal is prosecuted in New York. However, the mounting evidence against him seems to be, from what we can see here, overwhelming. We know these drug boats are coming out of Venezuela. We know the Venezuelan government has been cooperating with known terror organizations, as the intelligence chief gave us a statement on this back in December.
Yes.
And so I'm confident that he will be brought to justice. Back to your point, though, President Trump has worked brilliantly to warn his adversaries. You'll recall Iran was warned over and over to shut down your program. Maduro was warned. Even when we took Soleimani out, this president is able to order strategic strikes that do so in such a way to minimize the danger. It doesn't mean we're not going to lose some Americans some of these strikes, but those three have been brilliantly executed. And as long as this president is in the White House, our adversaries are going to have to think twice. They know. And by the way, when we went in and bombed, Iran's nuclear facilities, the Chinese and Russians had no clue that we were there. And don't think they haven't thought about this. They can make all the bluster they want, but I think we could probably go pick up any leader anywhere in the world and pull them out of office if we needed to. And our adversaries are aware of that.
And we're going to be safer off for it and better off for that. So, gentlemen, I want to say thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Riley.
Thank you, Riley. Thank you, Colonel.